Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Steve, will you do the pledge for us?
I will, thank you. Please place your hand over your heart. Join with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Steve. Roll call, please.
Christ,
Present.
Hoffbauer,
Here.
Hahn and Barger absent, but we do have a quorum. Items 1 and 2 are placed before you on the consent.
I need a motion for 1 and 2 for consent.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 3 is to accept contract 5037 and order final payment to Perimeter Security Group for construction of the Lancaster Water Reclamation Plant entrance improvements, resulting in contract amount as shown on the agenda.
Anything that we need to...
No.
This was just a routine replacement of the entrance gate to the treatment plant to increase security.
Get moved to approve?
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 4 is to authorize issuance of purchase order to Wood Environmental and Infrastructural Solutions in the amount as shown on the agenda to provide biological consulting services for the Lancaster Water Reclamation Plant Eastern Agricultural Site.
I think we have this on the next one, too, don't we?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, I'll make a motion to approve that.
I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 5 is to approve the sewage system management plan.
Is there a report?
This is just a routine. This is a report that's required by the state for anyone that owns a sewer system, and it documents what your preventive maintenance practices are and your maintenance program and monitoring and all the emergency contacts. And so it's required to be updated every 5 years. There were minimal updates for this version, and we recommend approval.
Questions? I'll make a motion we approve that.
I'll second that. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item 6 is regarding the wastewater revenue program. Item A is to order the wastewater service charge report containing description of each parcel and the amount of proposed wastewater service charge for 2019-20 and for each parcel filed with the clerk of this district. Item 2 is to introduce an ordinance prescribing the service charge rate and means loading per unit of usage for this district and providing the collection of such charges on the tax roll and waive reading of the said ordinance in its entirety. Item C is also to introduce an ordinance prescribing industrial waste surcharge rates for this district and waive reading of said ordinance in its entirety, and to establish May 9th at 9:30 in this room for the date, time, and place for the public hearing and to order publication of the required public notices.
Report?
Yes, directors, we do have a report on this. The previous package of rates that the board has approved ends this year with this current fiscal year, and so we've got a package of rates to recommend for the coming fiscal years. And I'd like to introduce Dave Bruns. He's head of our financial management department to walk you through the presentation.
Good morning. You should have a packet of slides where we sort of go through the process, how we came up with the recommended rates. As Grace mentioned, the current rates were adopted 4 years ago. We went through the process, and at that time we had refunded your existing bonds, lowered the rates, and so the rates have been held constant for each of the last 4 years. That rate ordinance expires this year, hence why we're going through the process of recommending rates. Our goals in all of this is that we have to meet the district's obligations, both to treat their wastewater, whatever outstanding financial obligations they may have. We want to implement the most cost-effective rates. We recognize that the keeping rates as low as possible is a key component, and that we also, though, have to comply with the policies that the board has adopted. And as we go through the slides, in particular, the reserve policy that the the board adopted 2 years ago and then reaffirmed again this past year.
What is the board's policy on reserves?
And we'll go through it, but it establishes 3 types of reserves. There's unrestricted reserves, designated reserves, which the board has said we want to collect these and use them for specific purposes, but can reassign them at their will. And then there's restricted reserves, which are collected for a specific purpose and can only be used for the specific purpose. In the policy, particularly on the designated reserves, it has to do with the 2 key ones. There's a O&M reserve that's specifically as it relates to cash flow, because all of our revenues, for the most part, are collected on the property tax rolls. So we get them at 2 designated spots during the year, in late December, early January, and then again late April, May. And so we have to manage cash flow. So there's a policy regarding cash flow. There's also a capital reserve fund, which is really designed as capital projects fluctuate from year to year so that we don't have peaks and valleys in the rates, and it smooths out the rates and is designed to ensure that funds will be available when capital projects are needed. There are smaller reserves that are set aside for things like emergencies, earthquake preparedness, some of those kinds of things. The designated or the restricted reserves, the biggest one the district has is the Capital Improvement Fund. Those are the connection fees that are collected from new users, set aside so that as we need to expand facilities, existing users don't have to subsidize the growth that takes place in the district.
Okay.
And we'll go through, when we get towards the end, it'll show in terms of the proposed rates and what it is in terms of percent of targeted goals that are established in the reserve policy and where we stand. Okay, just then going through the slides, some of them you're very familiar with. There's the map of the district just showing the service area of the district, that the treatment plant currently treats about 15 million gallons per day. It was the plant was upgraded in 2012. It's a full tertiary level treatment plant. But right now, agricultural reuse is still the predominant reuse of the water, although we are working with the cities and the water districts to head towards municipal reuse. But we still, because the district is an enclosed basin, we have to put all the water to some kind of reuse. So while municipal reuse is being developed, the remainder of the water is then used for agricultural purposes. In terms of capital needs, this is really what we're looking towards in the future, that when the plant was upgraded back in 2012, we made the decision, the board made the decision at that time that we would, while we went to tertiary level treatment and went to full conventional activated sludge, we continue to use the existing inlet works and the primary treatment plants because it reduced the amount of money that had to be expended at that time. But those facilities that we're still using, they were built sometime between 1958 and 1994, depending on the specific facility. But for all intents and purposes, they've either reached or are nearing the end of their useful life and do need to be replaced. And so over the next several years, the proposal is to replace those facilities, and it's an estimated cost of about $40 million. So when we ran the projections, we have a long-term model to run the numbers out so we can look at different scenarios, moving capital projects in and out, and how we can best do things. We looked at operation and maintenance, included some amount of inflation. We included the future capital needs. We looked at financial reserves. We looked at debt levels. Should we take on more debt? Are we already at appropriate levels? One of the other policies the board has adopted is a debt management policy that sort of provides guidelines on what are the right levels of debt that we should take on. One of the things that when we looked at this that we took into consideration is the board or the district already has a significant level of debt from the 2012 project. About 50, and you'll see it when we get to the budget, about 50% of the budget is actually related to debt. And the rating agencies, the last time they reviewed our ratings, commented that while our amount of level of debt was high, then they were concerned about it because we weren't planning to take on more debt. They sort of let it slide and gave us a fairly good rating. Our concern being that if we take on more debt, the rating agencies are going to come back and flag that and actually lower our credit rating, which would make the cost of borrowing even higher. So we're looking more of a pay-as-you-go basis on these projects as opposed to taking on more debt. The next page, you can see the proposed expenses. O&M increases pretty much following inflation. We made an assumption about 3% inflation. Obviously, if it comes in lower, we would adjust the budgets, but we're trying to be conservative there. The capital, you can see, for the first couple of years stays relatively low. It does increase in fiscal year 22-23, and then for a couple more years after that. You see the debt service, and so the total expenses there. On the revenues, the first several revenues are somewhat fixed, like the property taxes. It's based on our proportionate share of the legacy amount left over from Prop 13. We do have contracts and interest, sale of recycled water in particular. We do have some connection fees coming in as new users, and then we have the user fees that come in. These are both the service charge from the residential commercial users and the industrial waste surcharge, which comes from the industrial users. And on these, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but these assume a $15 per year increase in the rates. The current rate is $476 per single family home per year. This assumes a rate increase of $15 per year for each of those 4 years. The next slide, and this is where we get into the discussion of the reserves. You can see the green line shows the targeted reserves based on what's outlined in the reserve policy. And you can see with the proposed increase that it stays at around 100%. It does dip down as we get into the capital project, sort of comes up and goes down. So we think this is appropriate as it relates to the reserve policy, that it doesn't. We looked at other scenarios. You know, if you have lower rates, you're just significantly below the targeted reserves. We didn't want to go above the targeted reserves. You know, we're trying to keep the rates as low as possible. So we thought this one keeps you around the targeted reserve. It's a little bit below, but it keeps it within a reasonable range. Yes, sir.
So I'd like to just, I'm following through these slides, and I'm trying to get, an understanding here on the, when we're looking at the budget expenses and then we jump to the revenues, I noticed that, again, most of it looks like it's staying relatively steady until 22-23. What happens there? It looks like there's about a 10% jump there, and then in the expenses, but
yeah, in the $40 million upgrade of the headworks and the primary treatment, that sort of, it slowly begins in 21-22. A big piece of it hits in 22-23 and then through 23-24. So
is that then when I flip back over to the next page, then is that what accounts for there's that big dip that occurs there going in from basically 23 out to 25?
Yes. Yeah, and there's some other things going on out there with capital projects. There is some upgrade and as it relates to centrifuges and solids processing that takes place further out there as well that impacts some of the capital.
But there's we're looking at a relatively fixed rate and rate increase as we move forward, and we're not looking at trying to make this thing jump up to match that expenditure.
No, and that's one of
front load it a little bit.
And yeah, exactly. That's one of the things we looked at, was the idea that the reserves will go up and down, and the idea being when they came down was because we didn't want to have to spike the rate and then bring it down, and that, you know, everybody prefers seeing their rates stay more constant and be able to plan accordingly for what the rates are going to be. So yeah, the goal has always been to have smooth transitions from year to year, as opposed to having peaks and valleys.
So when we're talking about the potential for or the proposed $15 a year rate increase here, that $15 in relationship to what is when we say $15, that's for the residential user?
Yes. If we go to the next page that shows
okay.
the proposed rates,
Thank you.
those are the rates for a single-family home. Everybody else is proportioned off a single-family home, so that if you have a store, or if you have a restaurant may be 10 sewage units, has 10 times the flow. They pay the same rate. They're using 10
Right.
sewage units as opposed to 1 sewage unit. But everybody would pay the same rate. And you can see the rates. The current rate is $476 per year per single-family home, just about $40 a month. And then it shows the rate going up $15 for each of the 4 years, to where it goes up to about $44.50 per month. And that is the single-family home rate.
And what is the difference between District 14 and District 20?
Right now, District 20 is about $100 per year higher than District 14. They had some other issues related to groundwater cleanup that their rate is actually higher, but their proposed rate increase is $15 per year as well.
Okay.
And then just
Do you have their rates so I can write them down?
Yes.
The proposed?
So the current service charge rate is in District 20 is $575 per year. And the proposal for the rates for the coming 4 years is $15 each year, identical to District 14's increase.
And then in terms of schedule and public outreach, today's proposed action is to do what's called receive and file the service charge report. It's required under state law if you collect the service charge on the property tax roll. And then we would propose introducing the ordinances so that we could come back in May and then hold a public hearing that's required by law. There's a 45-day noticing period under Prop 218. And we would hold a public hearing and take into consideration input on the service charge report, the proposed rates, all the ordinances, and then come back in June to adopt the final budget.
And what would happen if we didn't do these rate increases?
The way it is now, the ordinance that's in effect, it has a rate that becomes effective July 1st, but it doesn't have an end date. So if you took absolutely no action, that rate would carry forward into the next year.
What would happen to the district?
In terms of the district, it's a question. Partly, it's a question of, and actually, I'll hand you out. We did some. Thanks. We actually did some analysis if we went from no increase in the rates up to a $20 increase, and you can see how it relates to the targeted reserve. So if the lowest line obviously is the no increase, that you can see if we continue doing the capital projects, you drop down to where your reserves are about 15% of the target as you move outward. So it doesn't.
Let's so I can grasp this. Let's talk about the reserves.
Okay.
And how much total reserves do we have?
Okay, hold on. I have those numbers. Okay, currently their total reserves, which includes the operational reserves.
Now, this is District 14.
This
correct?
District 14, yes, is about $50 million.
Okay.
And, and that is where you're about 90% of the targeted reserve. So when you drop down to 15% of that, you're going to, be down around $7 million.
And over the next 5 years, at a $1.25 per month for everybody, how much money are we raising?
There are about 60,000 sewage units in the district, so every dollar per year generates about $60,000. And you can see, went back on the reserves, you can see the $15.
Hang on while I do the math.
The $15 per year generates about $1.1 million per year.
Right, but, and what would happen if, and I'm asking these questions because this is the most complained about issue at our city council meetings. So it is one of the highest taxes and we have an individual that constantly complains. So I want to be able to understand it and to justify it. So this is for us to maintain a $50 million reserve, correct?
Correct.
This is in order for us to justify a $40 million expense that we're going to have as improvements at the plant.
Yeah, I mean, part of it it does, and keeping those reserves is that, and we adjust the reserves based on anticipated needs, that if there's more capital that we're trying to build reserves up ahead of time so that we don't need a big jump in the rates when we get out to where the capital project is. So some of it, as Director Hoffbauer said, is it's smoothing out the rates over a number of years to when the capital projects take place.
And when do we anticipate, when are we going to start work out at the other facility then? It's going to start in what, 2 years?
Yes, it shows, and when you look at the capital, you see some of the work begins late in 21-22. The bulk of the work takes place in fiscals 22-23 and 23-24. And then we do have a long-term capital plan where, looking even further out, there's additional projects as you get out in 27, 28, 29 for replacing centrifuges and doing other work that needs to take place.
And what is the reserves in District 20?
Their current reserve is about $35 million, a little less than $35 million. But keep in mind too, and it doesn't show up on these graphs, they're actually less than 100% of their target now. So if they were to get up closer to their target, they should probably be somewhere around $40 to $45 million.
But currently they have 35.
Yes.
We have 50.
Yes.
Their rates are $100 more per year per household.
Correct.
And that's covering, that's continuing, that's covering that ongoing remediation that we have to handle,
Yes,
right?
that's part of the reason there's just the $100 higher, is it's paying for the groundwater remediation that's taking place.
Right.
And they also are a smaller district, so it's the expenses are
It's not spread out as
Right.
much.
Yeah, well, in terms of numbers of users, they have about 35,000 total sewage units, whereas this district has around 60,000 total sewage units. So there is a difference in the numbers of sewage units. So size does factor into what the reserves are as well.
Okay, so
Now, and you raised the question, the size of the bill and it being on the tax roll. One of the reasons, that we put it on the tax roll, and admittedly on the tax bill, it does end up looking like a huge number. The reason we do that is the assessor's office charges us 25 cents a parcel to do all the billing, the collection, send us the money. If we had our own billing system, we couldn't even cover the postage for 25 cents. So we do it because it's the most cost-effective means, not because it's not a property tax, it's not related to property value, but it is the most cost-effective means of both issuing the bills and then collecting the revenue.
Good to know. Okay.
Now, in terms of public outreach, one of the things we have to do is send out the Prop 218 notice, and you've got a sample in your agendas, and we tried to put it where we gave people an overview of who the sanitation districts are, partly because most people, it's out of sight, out of mind. They don't know who we are, so we want to give them some introduction, who we are, what things we've done, steps we've done to reduce costs, how they can apply for the low water rebate program and actually get a lower rate. So we put how to protest, we put all those kinds of things in there. We are planning to have a series of information meetings, 4 information meetings where we'll be putting on presentations, answering questions. We're going to do a tour of the treatment plants. In this case, for Lancaster, it will be on April 6th. It's Saturday. We'll do a tour of the treatment plant so they can actually see how the plant operates, what the money is going for, and then we'll have an information meeting there as well.
How many people usually show up for those?
The last one we had, I would say probably about 30 people showed up.
Thanks.
And then we'll also we have information on our website. The presentation that we'll make at the information meetings, we're actually going to record that and have that available on the website so that people who can't make it can get that same information. We also have a toll-free number so that if they have questions, they can call us directly to get information.
And this gets mailed to each customer?
By law, you have to mail a individual copy to each property owner, and it has to tell them not just what the rates are, but what their specific charge would be.
Okay, are we receiving and filing this only, or are we accepting these as what we're going to do?
No, the receive and file really just starts the process that you have to come back and hold a public hearing, and then at that point you can decide to adopt or not adopt the rates as you see fit. But yeah, this is just to start the process so that we can then send out the notices so that there's something for people to discuss.
I'd just like to make sure we're clear about that, though, is we are receiving and filing the report. However, we are introducing the ordinance today as well, because adoption of the ordinance requires the 2-step process, as you're aware.
And the ordinance would have those rates included?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
But following public input and further review by the board, you could always make an adjustment that just says this is what the proposed rate is. It doesn't fix the rate, correct, at this point?
We could reintroduce a new rate schedule and then adopt it. The introduction and the adoption has to occur at 2 separate meetings that are at least 6 days apart.
Understood.
Okay. So how stable is District 40s with 35 million?
District 20.
District 20? I would say they actually, I think District 14 is in better financial stability than District 20. District 20, they are below their targeted levels, and part of their proposed rate increase is to get them back up to those targeted levels. So, neither district is on the verge of bankruptcy, but again, it's trying to comply with the policies as the board has adopted them. It is to...
Okay, if I came back and I said I want the rates to be, instead of $1.25 a month, I want them to be 99 cents a month, what would happen?
Legally or financially? Financially, I think we'd run new numbers to be able to disclose
financially,
what the coverage is.
Yeah, financially, if you look at this, if we're talking about
the numbers that I have, it's
$10 let's say a $10 increase, which is about a little less than $1 a month.
Okay.
You can see that on here.
Well, that cuts it by a third. I don't want to cut it by a third. I'm saying at 99 cents, it's almost $1.
For just $1 per year or $1 per month?
$1 per month,
Okay, which is, that's what I said, it's about $10 per year.
$12.
Yeah, well, and I was going to say, on this one, we should, just so you can see the graph, it's got a $10, so it's,
Okay.
you know,
Somewhere
relatively
between
in
the
that
purple and
range.
the
It's the kind of the purplish line. And you can see that the reserves drop down to around, you know, when you get out further, about 50%. It's not great, but you know, the district can certainly operate at that level. That's, you know, part of it is the question. You know, the board has adopted the policy, and we're just trying to recommend rates that conform to the policy. Certainly, you know, the board can amend the policy and say, well, you want
No,
lower
I
reserves.
understand that, but
Do we have, is there an impact on the, on bond, and financial ratings based on that, where that reserve is at then? I mean,
It's sort of a yes and no. There's no, as long as you're not proposing to do future borrowing or go out into the bond market anytime soon, the impact on that would be negligible, if any. If you were going to do future borrowings, then potentially it would, because the rating agencies, you know, they want to see.
they look at those rates.
They look at, you know, what your rates are, how many
What is our-
days of cash, all those kinds
what
of
is our
things.
current rate?
I believe it's a AA minus. We just, a couple of years ago, we got re-rated, and they upgraded the district's rating based on, because of the reserves that we had. So it's the kind of thing, potentially, you never know, they could look at saying, no, you're lowering reserves. They typically review the ratings about every 2 years.
Well, although I don't think most people would have a problem with it, some people would, at $15. So, do you have any other questions?
No, I'm
going to have you change it, okay? I'm going to have you change it to 99 cents. I think we have enough reserves. I didn't make the reserve policy.
I hear you say 99 cents. The only question I'd ask there is $1 when people, because when you give them the annual rate, it's going to be, you know, so many dollars and 82 cents. It, you know, they like to see nice round even dollar amount, but if you want 99 cents, we can do that.
Well, what they like to see is zero.
Yeah.
Well, no, agreed.
Okay,
It's
if
the
you want to
ideal
see what
number.
they like to see, it's not, I want them to, I appreciate what you guys are trying to do, but we have several individuals that are saying the seniors are, it means a difference to them. And does it mean a difference between $15 and $12? I think the difference is that we are still trying to fight for them, and in order for us to do a $40 million improvement, I want to show them that we are still fighting for
Okay.
them.
No, and 99 cents is fine. Now, the other thing.
If you want to change it, or you want to do the math right now to come up with a nice number, it's okay with me.
No, I mean,
Under $1.
okay, now that's fine. We can go with the 99 cents. That's fine. The other thing is, I would say, especially for the seniors, that one thing we have tried to make sure they're aware of, it's on our website, it's in the notice, we do have a low water rebate program. And so, and typically, particularly for seniors where you may have only 1 or 2 people living in the home, they can qualify for a reduced rate. And they can get down to where they would pay 60% of what a single family home pays. And so that program is available, and we've tried to do a significant amount of outreach so that they are aware of the program.
Can you bring us some paperwork next time and to make sure that that's available? So we
Yeah.
can do that?
Yeah, and in fact, and like I said, on here, there's a big section here that talks about it.
I'm going to have our staff get a hold of you, and I would like
Okay.
for us to put that in. We do a letter that goes out to the entire community, and you can have a whole section in there and explain how
Okay.
the seniors can reduce their rates. We'll give you
We had a
that.
similar discussion when we went through our waste management, solid waste management. and we found some programs for low waste generators and stuff like that. And it's amazingly, it's unbelievable how difficult it is to get that information out to people, it seems like, you know? And you see the guy that's always just put the one bag in his trash, or the one guy that's flushing that toilet once every other day, you know? And we need to be able to make sure that they're aware of that. So
Yeah, no, and we'll certainly.
I think Mr. Christ has got that's a great point, if we can put
So
it out.
you'll make sure that city staff contacts them and we put it in our Outlook magazine? And we'll do the groundwork for it and do everything. We're just going to need your
Yeah,
participation.
and like I said, and we do have it in the notice. It is also on our website as well. So we've tried to make sure that it is, that people are aware of it and have taken advantage of it.
Okay,
So-
so
I'm sorry.
knowing that I want this rate to be under $1, if you want to do the math, so I'll make the motion to receive and file it, changing the 125 to under $1. If you,
And the 99 cents would be $11.88 per year,
Okay.
$11.88 per
Right.
year.
So, I'm sorry, if we can we then amend the proposed rate so that we can introduce today with these numbers? Can we just do some quick
Make
math?
a motion with the appropriate amendments or something like that.
So on the introduced ordinance in your package, the rates appear on page 3 of the proposed ordinance. You'll see section 3 establishes the service charge rate. Sorry, let me just show this to everyone.
can't we just make the motion with the appropriate adjustments?
So if we did this, I would just want to make sure we're going to move away from a flat dollar amount, and it'll be,
Well, no, it'll still be, instead of going up $15, the
Right.
first year it'll go up $11.88, which is 99 cents a month. And then the next year it goes up another $11.88, another 99 cents per month for the 4 years.
And when we do the workshop, I want it reflected that the board reduced
Sure.
it
Okay?
because of what they felt to the lowest level that we can actually do it and maintain
Healthy
decent reserves.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Grace, is that okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, if we're getting into too much stuff as far as what we're doing and we're not going to be able to operate, you let us know, correct?
Yes, no, this is.
No, and I think.
Yes, no?
Yeah, we'll be okay. I
Yes,
think,
we
and-
will let you know, but no, we are not doing
Yeah,
that.
and
Okay.
it's the kind of thing, part of why we only do 4 years, I mean, you know, some agencies have said, well, let's adopt rates for 10 years, and we recognize, we've looked at, you know, what should the rates be farther out, but 4 years gives you flexibility that if something happens, we have reserves we can dip into, and, you know, whether they need to be higher or lower at the end of 4 years, we definitely come back and keep you apprised.
Okay, perfect.
so I want to make sure I've got this right.
So I'll make the motion
I'll
with the
second it.
appropriate amendments.
I'll second it.
Okay. So again, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, we're going to introduce, the board is voting to introduce a service charge rate increase per sewage unit that would be $11.88 per year for each of the following 4 fiscal years.
And the industrial waste surcharge rates will go up by the same
The same
percentage.
Percentage, so it'll be adjusted accordingly.
Yes.
And that'll be the introduced ordinance.
Correct.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So we do have a motion by me and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for helping us walk through
That's
that.
what goes to the newspapers, so we'll fix it. Yes. Okay, if there's no further business on the agendas, I do believe Chairperson Christ had questions regarding the regular meetings.
Yes. Just to let Mr. Hoffbauer understand what I had requested, that if we could meet at a mutual location, say AVTA, where we could hold the 14 meeting, and right after that, we could hold your meeting, it would be better for staff, better for everybody. They're going to let us know if we can do that.
And does something come up about having to have the meeting in the jurisdiction though?
Yes, under the Brown Act, the meetings, and for this type of agency, they can either be held within the jurisdiction or at the principal office of the entity. The principal office of the entity is in Whittier, and my understanding is that Districts 14 and 20 have sought instead to meet within their jurisdictions. And therefore, because their jurisdictions are separate, 14s and 20s, there is no place that's in common where they could be held at the same time.
And there's no waiver?
Not under the Brown Act, not unless we go to the legislature and get an exemption from that portion of the Brown Act. There are other options, however, to hold the meetings closer together, closer in time. For example, if we wanted to move it away from, right now, as you know, currently we hold them in the City Hall for Lancaster for District 14 and the City Hall for Palmdale for District 20. There was a place that we could find, or two places we could find in each jurisdiction that is closer. It could help compact that time frame. That would be acceptable under the Brown Act.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, but it doesn't, that doesn't, I'll talk to our legislators, and does it have to come from the state or to amend the Brown Act or amend the sanitation code?
It could be amended in the Sanitation District Act because then a later adopted.
Could it be an Attorney General opinion?
No, it could not.
It
has to be legislative in nature in order to abrogate the current
Who am I going
law.
to talk to? Am I going to talk to county or am I going to talk to state?
You're going to talk to the state legislator.
Okay.
Who could introduce a bill that could amend that portion for the sanitation districts.
Or for all districts?
Yes, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that offline as well, Director, if there's a way that we could work on behalf
Okay,
of the
I
districts.
can send them your way and do that if I need it, but I understand what we're just trying to make it so we can make it more efficient. Both cities are getting along very well now, so.
And to be clear, Mr. Chairman, this is something that applies statewide to every public agency. And if we were to seek an amendment, I think the SAN districts would be the sponsor of that. And we would work with legislators in order to get an exemption probably under the County Sanitation District Act in order to provide for that for these districts. And again, I'd be happy to talk to you directly about that.
I got to believe there's other districts that are butting each other or somehow interweave or, that somehow the geology is out there that causes certain districts to maybe poke into another district where it's got to be close, and it might facilitate some of these other districts as well. Are we the only place where the city jurisdictions overlap the sanitation district jurisdictions?
Oh, no, not at all.
So again, we can't be the only guys with this question.
Yeah, but you
But it's
guys
two
would
different-
hold it at your district office then.
Because the law allows for the meeting to be held at the principal office.
Right.
And the principal office is in Whittier for these two districts. So that is one of the exceptions. There's 7 exceptions, but none of the other ones apply here. For example, the board might meet outside of the district if they were meeting in order to make decisions about a facility that the district owned outside of the district. That would be acceptable, but only for the purpose of meeting on that subject.
Got it. No, I understand.
And so otherwise, we're bound by the Brown Act to meet within the jurisdiction or at the principal office.
Do the other districts, they meet at their city halls, or does everybody else meet downtown at Whittier?
Almost everybody meets at Whittier. There are some exceptions. Santa Clarita Valley Sanitation District, for the example, they meet at the Santa Clarita City Hall because that's within the district, the Santa
Right.
Clarita Valley Sanitation District boundaries.
All right.
Wouldn't this make it easier for you guys?
Yeah,
Just to go to one place and.
I don't think anybody would deny that. I think the only issue is really making sure that we're complying with the state law.
Right.
yeah. And
Director,
then the timing too, so if anything drags over, then what do? You just hold the start of the next meeting.
You just put yours that would start this at 9:30, this at 10,
yeah.
and then if it goes over, we flip into yours.
Yeah.
So directors, I'd be happy to go back, prepare a report, and then talk about potentially beneficial avenues in order to introduce, right now in the legislative session, we'd probably be at a place where we'd seek a gut and amend piece of legislation for this year, because everything had to be introduced by February 22nd. But we'd be happy to talk with our legislative folks about how to potentially
I
introduce
have a
something.
problem talking to attorneys. It costs a lot.
I'm on retainer, and we're happy to serve, of course.
There
This
you
is our
go,
job,
yeah.
Mr.
Good answer.
Mr. Chairman.
Good answer.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate it. Anything else?
Nope,
Everything
that's
good?
good.
Okay,
Thank you.
we're adjourned.
Okay.
We stand adjourned.